Before we jump into this video, I want to point out that only 26% of my viewers are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy my content, hit that subscribe button so that you'll actually see when new stuff comes out. Let's see if we can get that graph, that bar to be a little bit more even. Let's see if we can get that flipped around the other way. Some of my earliest and fondest memories of video games take place on handheld consoles. Things like the original Game Boy. I can remember being a kid and pacing around the house while trying to get through the SS Anne on Pokemon Blue as a youngster. Hopefully some of you guys know what I'm talking about there. And through the years, I've owned a lot of handheld gaming systems, and I've always really liked them. In fact, if I'm going to choose between sitting locked in front of a TV with a controller or playing on a handheld, I prefer to play on the handheld because I have a really hard time sitting in one place for an extended period of time. I like to be able to multitask and I like to be able to move around, so handheld game systems just always made a lot of sense for me. But sadly, the handheld gaming market is kind of in a weird place right now. The Nintendo Switch is pretty much it at this point. We've gone from a time when there was the Game Boy, the DS, the PSP, to now just having the one. And the big reason for that is because mobile phones are so ubiquitous, they're so big, and they're pretty good at gaming. However, I do think there is room in the market for something to split down the middle between a smartphone and a handheld gaming system. Something that wouldn't cost the full retail price of a top-end flagship phone. Something cheaper. Something you could reasonably have as maybe a secondary device or even a device for your kid. Now they can text you on the same thing that they want to game on. You can keep track of them and they can game on this one device. And yes, before anybody says anything, it's been tried many times in the past. Okay, so we have things like Sony's Xperia Play, which featured a slide-up design that gave you, buttons like a game system. You see in the middle here, this was a capacitive region that would try and sort of simulate dual analog sticks, although they didn't work super well. But this was a pretty cool idea. We've got now things like Lenovo's Legion gaming phone, Asus's ROG phone, which actually has capacitive keys on the back, R1, R2, L1, L2, and then even two more buttons on the back as well that can be mapped to different on-screen actions using a software overlay. And of course, we've got things like Razer's Kishi device, which just sort of clamps onto your phone of choice and gives you proper controls. And I use something like that from time to time, but I'm not talking about anything quite like that. What I'm talking about is something like this concept here, tweeted by Let's Go Digital. This is a concept of a Sony PlayStation 5G gaming smartphone, okay? And this thing looks really, really cool. So I retweeted this several days ago. You can find the pictures on my Twitter timeline, or you can just search for Let's Go Digital NL on Twitter and find it there as well. But you've got several different looks at this. Keep in mind, this is just a concept, okay? So this isn't a real product. You can't go to a store and buy this. You're not going to go to a store and buy this. But, it's a really cool thing, and it got me thinking about this sort of concept. What would a device like this be capable of doing, and why do I think it might be something people might want now, whereas maybe they wouldn't have a few years ago when Sony tried it with the Xperia Play? Well, the biggest thing is that mobile computing has gotten considerably more powerful. There are games on mobile that are actually pretty good now, whereas back then it was a little bit iffy. So you've got things like Genshin Impact, Fortnite, Call of Duty, and these games are doing really, really well. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention PUBG Mobile as well. All of those games are doing really, really well. They look good, they play well, and they're making a lot of money, okay? These games are designed to be using touch-only controls. And you may have noticed several of those games are competitive games. Well, look, if you took something like this with a full array of buttons, right, and you built in a software overlay, something kind of more system level that allowed you to map these controls to the controls on the screen of these games. You wouldn't even necessarily need them to update and support this natively. You could make this work on your side. you would have a massive advantage in these competitive games. You might even call it an unfair advantage in these sorts of games. I made a video like probably 2 years ago now where I played PUBG Mobile on the NVIDIA Shield on my TV using a controller and using some software called Octopus, which is super janky, but it worked, and the game was incredibly easy at that point. I was unstoppable using a controller versus people trying to use a touchscreen to play. So people that are competitive and that want to be the best at these sorts of games, well, something like that would give you an unfair advantage. And I know that's not necessarily a good thing, but it is a thing to consider for sure. Hey, I'm a mobile gamer. Well, I'm a serious mobile gamer. Look at what I play on. Even if this thing had to use, slider nubs a la the PSP instead of actual analog sticks to keep the profile lower, you're going to be at a real advantage here versus someone on a phone. And then, of course, you've got games like Genshin Impact that aren't competitive that would just also massively benefit from having a full array of buttons. It's not a coincidence that Lenovo is adding capacitive touch regions to their phone and doing this exact thing to a smaller degree. Obviously, having sticks to aim with might be an advantage, or sticks to move with at least, or something like that. Buttons are better. And then, of course, there's the whole array of emulators that are present on the Android ecosystem. And this thing will be a tremendous emulator device, having a full array of buttons like that and access to virtually every emulator around. And if it's running anything close to the Snapdragon 850, 60, 888, whatever, anything like that, you're going to be able to play pretty much anything you want to play on that. And then there's another side of this. And this side actually makes me think that it's not Sony that is best positioned to do this. It's actually Microsoft. And that side is xCloud. So, Microsoft has now over 20 million Game Pass subscribers. What could you do with this? Well, you could stream Xbox Game Pass games to this dedicated handheld and play console quality games on the go. Hey, it's got 5G, so it's definitely fast enough if you've got 5G. Hell, it's probably fast enough to stream games on LTE at this point in a lot of areas. Granted, if you're in the middle of rural Oklahoma or something like that, you're in South Dakota, let's say, maybe is a better example. Okay, maybe not, but if you're in any major city, the LTE itself is probably fast enough to stream games to this device. And especially if it's a single player game, sort of an adventure game or something like that, you can be just sitting there playing a really high-end game from pretty much anywhere on a device like that. And if you don't have data, well, you've got emulators, and you do have a pretty good selection of pretty decent Android games. And then you also have to consider the fact that a lot of game engines now support Android in a much more real way, right? So things like Unity work on Android really well now. There are even some Unreal Engine games on Android as well. There have been for a while, but it's easier to do now as the power of these systems, of the silicon here, I should say, has increased so greatly since Sony tried this way back in the day. These things were not very powerful. I mean, you were literally talking about half a gig of RAM and a Snapdragon S2. I mean, we're not even talking the same language anymore as to where we are now. You could do some real gaming on something like this thing. And as you see in this concept, they just slapped a camera module off of an Xperia, phone. Why not? Why couldn't you use this thing as a mobile phone type device? Turn it long ways. You could play Pokemon Go on it if you wanted to do that sort of thing. You could text on it. You could do whatever you wanted to do. And as we know from a lot of phones, it could be very thin. It could be very pocketable. If they use sliders instead of full analog sticks, is this thing pocketable? Yeah, absolutely, it'll be pocketable. USB-C with fast charging, all these sorts of things. You've got new versions of Bluetooth that could support low latency headsets and things like that. This thing, if it was made by someone like Microsoft, right, who can make good hardware when they want to, maybe we don't trust them so much with Android development at this point, but maybe they outsource this whole thing, right? Maybe they have Lenovo build this thing's hardware and software for them, because apparently they're not really capable of doing that on Android for some reason. But imagine if this happened. Maybe Microsoft just partners with Samsung, right? They're already big in with Samsung. Could Samsung make this thing and make it kick absolute ass? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, gaming on the Z Fold 2 is really good because you can open this thing up, you can slap on one of those controllers, like not the Razer Kishi because it doesn't really fit, I don't think, but like the one I've got does fit, and you can game on this thing. And it's really good. Imagine if it's something that's really thin, really low profile, and has the controls built in. xCloud streaming is there with Game Pass if you want to do that. But you can jump on the COD Mobile, PUBG, Fortnite, Genshin Impact, anything like that. Dominate on something like that. Switch over to Pokemon Go because you've got data as you're walking around town, and play Pokemon Go, whatever you want to do. I think this is a really, really fascinating concept. The question is the market there? Is there money to be made in this approach? I would love to know what you guys think of this down in the comments below. Let me know if you would be interested in buying something like this. I know a lot of you guys and gals are Surface Duo users, and therefore you're more interested in productivity, things like that. But try to put on your gaming hat for a second and think about the ways this might be fun to have. So guys, that's all I've got for you on this one. I'll see you on the next video, and until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.